Hi, this is Tom Hoskins for Mining Journal. I'm here with Rick Trotman, who's the president and CEO of Barksdale Resources, which is a Toronto-listed precious and base metals explorer with assets in Arizona and Mexico. Hi, Rick. How's it going?
Hi, Tom. I'm good today. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, why don't we start with a bit of an overview of the company for viewers who aren't so familiar with Barksdale?
Sure. Barksdale is a exploration company that focuses on the discovery of copper, zinc, lead, silver, and a touch of gold. We have projects that span both southern Arizona and northern Mexico in Sonora State. And we are in a couple of key districts that are anchored by very large companies that have very large projects. And so we have a great combination of project potential and strategic location.
Okay, so now today we're going to focus particularly on Sunnyside and San Antonio. Can you give us a bit more color about those two projects? What stage are you at the moment?
Sure. So Sunnyside and San Antonio are projects that are located within our Arizona portfolio of assets. These are kind of two of the bigger and more advanced projects within the Patagonia Mountain Range within our control. We control about 50% of the mineral claims within that district. The other half of the district is controlled by a company called South 32. It's a very large, diversified mining company, kind of 10 to 15 billion market cap, depending on the day. Our Sunnyside and San Antonio projects are kind of immediately surrounded by that company's mineral position. San Antonio is a project where we have drill permits, and we're able to drill right now a covered copper porphyry style mineralization target. And so that's a key piece for us moving forward. Very quick, very simple test, very cheap test to see if we can make a discovery there. And then Sunnyside is the crown jewel of the company. It is effectively a property that sits adjacent to one of the world's largest carbonate replacement deposits, the Taylor Hermosa system that's controlled by South 32. Effectively, we share a deposit. It straddles a property boundary. The company next door is advancing that asset. They've put several billion into acquiring it, and are going to be making a construction decision pretty quickly here on putting several billion into developing it. And effectively, that deposit spans both of our properties. We are now kind of in a position in the next couple of months to get our final permit to allow us to drill on that deposit and really show how much of it is on our property. And so we have those draft permits in hand, going through some kind of bureaucratic steps to tie off that process, and then we'll be in that stage where we can actually drill and see how much of that big asset is sitting within our mineral claim position.
So, and how have you found handling the permitting situation so far? I know obviously it varies a huge amount from state to state. How have you found the process?
Yeah, so we have several permits that we had to ultimately get, two from the state and two from federal government. The state ones were quite, I won't call it easy, but they were quite simple to go through those processes and to achieve those permits. The federal ones, those are a bear. We've been in this process for years now, Tom. Kind of just slugging our way through it, making incremental progress along the way. Now we're kind of on that glide path to the finish line, and it's a major sense of relief that we've gotten to this point. It's a big accomplishment for our company to undergo several years of permitting. When most of investors' attention spans are kind of in the weeks and months. Luckily, some very key large shareholders that have been with us for years, because they understand the significance of getting through this permitting process and what we can do once we have that permit in hand.
Yeah, understood. So looking to the kind of next few months, what can investors expect to see from you over the coming year or so?
Sure. Yeah. So we have a couple of different key milestones. So I mentioned before, we have the draft permit on Sunnyside. over the next, let's call it 2 up to 3 months, we'll be walking through the final steps there. And so that will ultimately result in us getting our final permit. That will then allow us to go and drill at Sunnyside. So those are key milestones. Those are big news events that will come out. Obviously, once we have that permit, we'll have a drill coming onto the property and starting to work. And so, I would suggest that, the regular release of drilling related information is going to be something that, our investors are going to follow keenly. In addition to Sunnyside and the work that we're doing there, we will drill San Antonio this year as well. And so investors can expect to receive information, through press release on what we encounter when we drill that first pass program at San Antonio. And then separately on a project that we haven't even talked about, this copper gold system that we have in Mexico called San Javier, we're working on a PEA, a preliminary economic assessment there. And so we'll have that out to market at some point in the next couple of months as well, once it's finished. A third-party consultant called Tetra Tech is working on that currently.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rick. I'd just like to ask you about your shareholder base for a second. Can you give me a bit more color about that?
Sure. I touched on it earlier. We've got very large, chunky shareholders that have been with us for quite some time. There's tend to be sophisticated funds and corporations. So I'd say about a quarter of our stock is held by corporations, including Tech Resources, very large diversified mining company based here in Canada, as well as the Cisco Development Corp. Those two companies have a big chunk of our stock. Another quarter of our stock roughly is held by institutions. This includes Crescat Capital out of the United States, US Global Funds out of the United States as well, and a smattering of other smaller funds that are kind of global in nature. And then we have probably 18% high net worth individuals, including the likes of Eric Sprott and some other very sophisticated mining folks that have had their markers down for years with this company. And then finally, about 5% of the stock is held by management, including about 1.5% by myself, another 1.5% by the CFO. We'll likely increase our stakes here. We have some offer coming towards expiry. So I know I'm personally going to be adding a couple 100,000 shares to my position. So roughly we have about 70% of the company that's in very stable hands. I can call the individuals that control those stock positions and kind of get a flavor of what they think and how they feel about the company, on a month-to-month basis. So it's a very privileged position that we're in, where we have that kind of clarity into our shareholder base, and we know that everyone is marching to the same beat. They understand the objectives, they understand what the focus is of the company, and what we look to achieve this year.
Okay, obviously a strong position to be in. And how about from a cash perspective? Where do you stand there?
Yeah, so here recently we had a tranche of warrants that came to expiry, and the vast majority of those were exercised. So we do have a pretty strong cash position right now. We have in excess of $6 million. I think we had 6.5 at the end of January. That's more than enough to allow us to drill at our San Antonio project, to get drilling underway at Sunnyside, and kind of allow us to go quite some time without having to go back to market. And so we're in a position where we don't have to raise money right now, and we can kind of get more of these milestones before we really have to kind of explore those options. But that being said, we'll ultimately end up having to raise more money. Hopefully we're doing it in a results-based environment, based on the success that we're having, hopefully with the drill bit.
Okay, fantastic, Rick. Well, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today, but that's great to get an overview of your company, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having us, Tom. It was a pleasure.
Not at all, and we'll see you again next time. That concludes this video for Mining Journal. Goodbye.